The ruins of the Black Citadel still smoked when the new order began. Soldiers planted sensors where alien towers had once risen, their cables snaking through shattered streets. Engineers erected scaffolding over glyph-marked walls, bolting steel into stone, making alien architecture serve human ends. The air smelled of ash and oil, of victory mingled with conquest. Human banners hung everywhere. They did not flap in the wind as fabric did, but shimmered with woven lights, powered by portable reactors. In their glow, the ruins no longer looked like monuments of an alien empire, but outposts of a new human frontier. Earth had changed too. Cities across the planet had grown taller, hungrier, louder. Factories churned day and night, not only to rebuild from wars past, but to arm for wars yet to come. What had begun as a desperate defense had become a relentless campaign of expansion. The portal was no longer a singular gateway. It had become a nexus. Branching pathways pulsed with unstable light as engineers stabilized them one by one, coaxing order from chaos. Already 2 new routes had been secured, though both carried scars of their strangeness: the crystalline realm from which the scouts had barely returned, and the wasteland of winds that whispered thoughts until minds unraveled. Still, humans had set foot there. Humans had left markers there. Humans had returned alive, and that was enough to call it progress. Elias walked the ruins of the citadel with eyes heavy from sleepless nights. He had not slept soundly since he found the map etched into alien stone, the countless dimensions, some glowing, others darkened forever. He could not stop seeing it whenever he closed his eyes. Each dark mark haunted him. Entire realms erased. Was that humanity's future, to destroy worlds in the name of survival? He paused in what had once been a ceremonial hall, now lined with stacked crates and humming equipment. Soldiers saluted as he passed. He acknowledged them with a nod, though their eyes unnerved him. They looked at him as if he were a symbol, not a man. "You carry yourself like a ghost," Sierra said from behind him. He turned. She was sharper now than she had ever been, hair tied back, armor polished, eyes alive with fire. She had risen in command with frightening speed. Her presence carried authority that no one questioned. "Perhaps I am," Elias said quietly. "Then haunt us well," she replied, "because the living have no choice but to move forward." Forward meant expansion. A new base was established near the glowing ocean, a cluster of domes and towers ringed by defensive guns. From there, expeditions launched through the stabilized portals. Reports returned daily, landscapes of crystal that bent light into infinite reflections, wastelands where the winds whispered until helmets were sealed tighter than coffins. Losses were frequent. But victories, small as they were louder. The crystalline realm offered new materials harder than any alloy yet forged. The wasteland winds, when harnessed through resonant filters, revealed streams of energy invisible to human sensors. Engineers theorized they could be weaponized. Every danger became opportunity. Every anomaly became a resource. Elias watched with unease. The remnants of the alien empire had not disappeared. Scattered survivors still fought, ambushing convoys, sabotaging equipment, chanting from shadows. They were fractured, weakened, but unbroken. Humanity called them insurgents. Elias thought of them as remnants of a fallen world that refused to bow. One evening, he was summoned to an interrogation chamber. An alien lay bound within, its body scarred, its eyes glowing faintly. "You trespass still," it rasped when Elias entered. Elias sat opposite. "We survived, we endure, you sought to erase us." The alien's mandibles clattered, a sound like bitter laughter. "Erase to preserve, burn to save. You spread like fire, and fire consumes." Elias leaned forward. "And if fire can forge as well as destroy, if survival means not erasing but defying what comes," the alien's eyes narrowed, "you do not yet understand what watches beyond." That night Elias dreamed. He stood at the edge of the glowing ocean. Its waves pulsed with light, beating like a heart. But when he looked closer, he saw not water, but eyes, countless eyes staring upward, unblinking. The ocean whispered in voices layered upon voices, words without meaning, or perhaps meaning too vast for comprehension. When he woke, his heart hammered and his skin prickled with cold sweat. And for the first time, he feared not the war he knew, but the war waiting beyond the veil. The first breach came weeks later. It began with distortions around the portal nexus. Sensors flickered, lights bent, shadows lengthened. Soldiers felt as though unseen fingers pressed against their skulls. Then the alarms screamed. From the stabilized branch to the crystalline realm, something emerged. It was not soldiers. It was not machines. It was light given form, shifting shapes that hurt the eyes. Where they touched, metal corroded, stone cracked, men screamed as if their minds were being peeled apart. Bullets passed through them as through water. Energy weapons dispersed harmlessly. Panic rippled through the base until one soldier hurled a container of crystalline fragments scavenged from that very realm. When the fragments struck the light shapes, they screamed not with sound, but with vibrations that shook the air. They recoiled, shuddering, and dissolved back into nothing. The base was saved, but the message was clear. The crystalline realm had not been lifeless. It had been waiting. Sira convened a war council that night. Generals, engineers, strategists filled the chamber, their voices a storm. "They are not the same as the enemy we knew," one said. "They are worse," another replied. Sira's voice cut through. "They are not invincible. We found their weakness. We will learn more. We will adapt." All eyes turned to Elias. He felt the weight of expectation press against him like chains. "You saw the map," Sira said. "You know this is only the beginning." "What do you see in what came through?" Elias's throat tightened. He wanted to say, "I see the end of us all," but instead he whispered, "I see proof. Proof that what the aliens feared was real, and proof that we were right to survive anyway." Sira's eyes glimmered. "Then we will show the universe what survival means." For the first time since the fall of the Black Citadel, Elias felt the war shift again. It was no longer about survival. It was no longer about conquest. It was about something larger, something that had noticed. And now, humanity was preparing to answer. The light shapes did not return at once. Days passed, then weeks. Soldiers grew restless, unsure whether the breach had been a singular anomaly or a foreshadowing of something greater. Patrols walked the perimeter of the portal nexus with weapons raised, while engineers reinforced barriers with layers of crystalline fragments embedded into plating. But Elias knew silence did not mean safety. Silence was the inhale before the scream. He spent the lull in study, poring over recordings of the breach. The footage showed figures of shifting radiance, patterns that bent geometry itself. They were not creatures in any form humans could categorize. Their movement was not flight, not stride, not drift, but something between all three. And their presence had weight. The air thickened around them. Instruments faltered. Even memory blurred in their vicinity. Some soldiers swore they forgot their own names while facing them, only to recall after they dissolved. Sira joined him in the chamber one evening, her face drawn from endless councils. "You have not left these walls in 3 days," she said. Elias did not look up. "If we do not understand them, we will not survive them." Her hand touched his shoulder, light but steady. "And if we cannot understand them," Elias closed his eyes, "then we will be as those realms on the map, darkened, erased." The return came on the 31st day. The alarms wailed again, but this time the breach widened. The crystalline realm pulsed with unnatural light, cracks spidering outward from the stabilized portal. And through it poured not dozens but hundreds of shapes, their radiance spilling across the base like a tide. Weapons fired. Bullets and beams carved the air, but as before, they passed through harmlessly. Soldiers fell back in disciplined waves, shielding civilians and engineers. The shapes pressed forward, their presence warping reality with every step. Then came the crystalline fragments. Grenades packed with shards detonated in bursts of shrieking resonance. The shapes convulsed, their outlines distorting. Some dissolved entirely. Others adapted, shifting into darker hues, resisting the vibrations. It became a battle of escalation. Humans learned, improvised, reshaped weapons mid-fight. The shapes countered, shifting forms, twisting harmonies. Elias stood on the command platform, his fists clenched. He felt the pull of their presence even from afar, as if they sought to peel his mind apart. He forced himself to watch, to record, to bear witness. Sira's voice roared over the comms, directing troops with unshakable clarity. Fall back to the second line, fragment launches forward, adaptive shields to maximum. The battle raged for hours. When the last shape finally dissolved, leaving behind only scorched stone and shattered crystal, the base was half ruined. Hundreds were dead, but humanity still stood. And that meant humanity had won. The survivors gathered in silence, their faces hollow. Victory felt less like triumph and more like reprieve. Elias walked among them, his heart heavy. He heard murmurs of what soldiers had experienced during the battle. They tried to speak to me, not in words, but in thoughts, like they were pressing meaning straight into my mind. I saw my mother, she's been dead for years. I saw her face inside that light. They are not soldiers, they are storms wearing shape. Elias carried those words with him to the council chamber. We cannot treat them as enemies in the way we knew before, he told the gathered leaders. They are not an empire, not an army, not a species. They are something older, something vaster. They do not think as we do. A general leaned forward, eyes bloodshot. Then how do we kill them? Elias hesitated. By refusing to think as they do, by being human. The chamber was silent. Then Sira spoke. Then we will fight storms with fire. The remnants of the alien empire stirred again in the wake of the battle. For the first time since the fall of the citadel, emissaries came forward not in battle, but in parley. They arrived under flag of truce, their bodies scarred, their armor broken, their voices trembling with tones that carried both defiance and resignation. Elias was present when they spoke. You see now, the alien leader rasped, its eyes glowing faintly. You see why we fought, why we erased. They are not conquerors, they are hunger, they are memory unbound. They do not kill, they consume. Sira's jaw tightened, and yet you failed to stop them. The aliens' mandibles clattered. We fought for eons, we burned worlds, we erased realms. But always they returned, always they pressed, until we had nothing left but ruin. Elias leaned forward. Then why parley now? The alien's gaze pierced him. Because you fight them still, and perhaps fire can answer fire. An uneasy truce was born. Humanity and the remnants of the alien empire shared knowledge, though never without suspicion. The aliens taught of resonant harmonics, of songs that split light and bent matter. Humans taught of adaptive shields, of fragment weapons, of strategies born of relentless improvisation. Together they planned, together they built, but mistrust simmered beneath every word. The aliens whispered that humans would one day consume as surely as the light shapes. The humans whispered that the aliens had failed once and would fail again. Only Elias stood between, carrying the weight of both fears. The next breach was larger. It did not come through the crystalline portal, but from the nexus itself. The very air split open, light pouring in like a wound torn across reality. Shapes emerged, not merely radiant figures, but towering forms, vast as buildings, their presence crushing. The ground buckled under them, air screamed, minds faltered, and yet humanity did not break. Artillery roared with fragments embedded in every shell. Shields shimmered with harmonics tuned to alien songs. Drones swarmed like hornets, darting between radiant limbs, lacing them with resonance. The remnants joined too, their chants weaving through the battlefield, breaking the rhythm of the shapes. For the first time, the storm recoiled not in adaptation, but in retreat. Elias stood on the ridge as the light receded, his chest heaving. He realized then that humanity had done what no erased realm had achieved. They had made the storm retreat. That night the camp was filled not with morning silence, but with something rarer, laughter. Soldiers sang crude songs, engineers drank until dawn, even the remnants watched in wary quiet, their eyes betraying a flicker of awe. Elias sat apart, staring into the dark horizon. He felt Sira approach, her steps familiar now as breath. We won, she said simply. For now, Elias murmured. She crouched beside him, her eyes alight. You do not see it yet, do you? We are becoming what they never expected. They adapt by shifting form. We adapt by being human, by changing not ourselves but our tools, our minds, our will. That is our weapon. Elias looked at her, at the fire in her gaze, and wondered if perhaps she was right. Perhaps humanity was not corruption. Perhaps humanity was defiance itself. But deep within the nexus, in places no human or alien could see, the light pulsed, not weakened, awakened. The laughter of victory lasted only a few days before unease returned. Soldiers began waking in the night, drenched in sweat, speaking of dreams not their own. Engineers reported instruments flickering with impossible readings, temperatures dropping below absolute zero, magnetic fields reversing without source, clocks running backward for minutes at a time. Elias knew these were not malfunctions. They were echoes, traces of the storm pressing closer. He stood at the edge of the Nexus chamber, watching the stabilized portals ripple like mirrors disturbed by unseen hands. Behind him, the Remnant's emissary approached, its voice dry as sand. "You feel it, do you not?" the alien rasped. "The boundary thinning." Elias turned, weary. "You told us they consume, but what are they? What do they want?" The alien's mandibles scraped together. "They do not want, they are want." Elias frowned. "That is not an answer." "It is the only answer," the alien said, its eyes gleaming. "They are hunger given shape. They are the shadow of the first light, the silence that followed the first sound. They are what remains when creation itself grows weary." Elias felt the chill of those words burrow into his bones. The warning proved true. On the 50th day after the great battle, the breach widened again, not within the crystalline portal, nor the Nexus itself, but across the very sky of the alien dimension. A tear appeared, vast as continents, splitting the heavens into bleeding light. Through it, shapes emerged, not countless figures, but one colossal presence. It towered higher than mountains, its outline fractal, repeating itself endlessly in smaller and smaller versions. Looking at it made soldiers fall to their knees, clutching their skulls. The remnants screamed, not battle cries, but prayers. Some clawed at their own flesh, begging for oblivion before the storm touched them. Sierra stood unflinching, shouting orders as artillery roared. "Focus fire, fragment saturation in grid formation, keep your distance." The weapon struck. Explosions tore chunks from the entity's outline, fragments of light scattering like embers. But every wound closed in moments, new forms blooming in place of the old. Elias watched from the ridge, horror in his chest. This was not merely an enemy, it was a concept given flesh. Something that could not be slain by attrition alone. The battle raged for 3 days. On the first, humanity and the remnants pushed the entity back, carving space with relentless bombardment. On the second, the entity learned, adapting to resonance, bending beams into silence. On the third, the skies above Earth shuddered. Reports flooded in through the stabilized portals, earthquakes without fault lines, oceans shifting against gravity, stars dimming in the night sky. The storm was no longer confined to the alien dimension. Its presence was bleeding through, drawn by the pathways humanity had carved. The council chamber on Earth erupted in chaos. Some demanded the portals be sealed, all projects abandoned, humanity retreating into isolation. Others argued that retreat would only delay the inevitable, that the storm now knew of their existence and would find them regardless. Elias stood in the center, silent until the shouts subsided. "You all missed the truth," he said finally. "This is not about the portals. This is not about what we built. This is about what we are. We woke something that preys upon defiance itself, and if we retreat, we are already erased. The only way forward is through." The chamber stilled. For a moment, he saw terror in every face, but beneath it, something else flickered, the fire of defiance that had carried humanity through every impossible trial. The remnants approached in secret that night, their emissary cloaked in shadow. "You speak as though you know their nature," it hissed, "but you do not yet grasp it. The storm is not single, it is not many, it is one will, one endless hunger. We fought to erase it, to blind it. We failed, you will fail." Elias met its gaze unflinching. "Then why come to me?" The alien's mandibles quivered. Because in failure we saw something we had not before. Your kind fights as no other has. You turn weakness to weapon. You carve victory from impossibility. Perhaps you may yet wound the unwoundable. Elias narrowed his eyes. Help us then, teach us what you know. The alien bowed its head. But know this, if you falter, if you stumble, the storm will not merely consume your world. It will consume every world tethered to you. Your kind may become the greatest feast of all. Preparations began in earnest. Humanity built weapons that sang in harmonics never before imagined. Cannons that bent sound into spears. Shields that shimmered with fractal geometry, scattering resonance across dimensions. Drones woven with crystalline cores, capable of striking even incorporeal forms. The remnants contributed their chants, their rituals, their strange methods of weaving will into sound. Together, for the first time, humans and aliens forged something greater than either alone. But Elias knew it would not be enough, for in his dreams he saw it. The storm, endless, unyielding, inevitable. He woke gasping, certain that it already knew his name. The next breach came not in the alien dimension, but in the heart of Earth itself. Over the Pacific Ocean, the sky split open, light cascading down in curtains that shattered clouds. From the rift, a shape emerged, smaller than the Colossus, but vast enough to dwarf entire cities. Its presence rippled across continents, sending millions into madness. The world's armies mobilized, but nothing availed them. Bullets passed through, missiles detonated harmlessly, even nuclear fire only made it shimmer brighter. Elias stood in the global command center, watching feeds from satellites. Cities burned, oceans boiled, populations fled in terror. For the first time, the storm was upon humanity's home, not at the edge of some distant portal. Sierra's voice crackled through the comms, unshaken despite the chaos. Elias, if we are to survive, we must strike now. No more waiting, no more retreat. The storm has come to Earth. Elias stared at the screens, his heart hammering. He thought of the erased realms, of civilizations that had fought and fallen. He thought of humanity's laughter after victory, the fire in their eyes. And he knew the time had come. We do not run, he said into the comms, his voice carrying across the command channels of the world. We do not bow, we are human, and we will fight. The storm roared, a soundless scream felt in every mind as the battle for Earth began. The storm fell upon Earth like a tide of radiant hunger. Cities dissolved into silence as its presence swept through streets and sky alike. The oceans boiled where its light touched them. Entire forests turned to ash without flame, and yet humanity did not scatter. Across continents, armies dug in, deploying weapons built from fragments and harmonics. Across oceans, fleets turned their guns toward the horizon. Across the void, orbital platforms lit with power drawn from the remnants' crystals. This time, Earth was not unprepared. The first volleys struck as the storm descended, artillery shells bursting in resonant fury. The entity convulsed, outlines tearing apart into screaming fractals. But as always, it adapted. Shimmering limbs twisted into forms that bent resonance away. That was when the second wave came, not weapons of destruction, but weapons of sound. Chants recorded from remnants' voices, woven into sonic cannons. The storm faltered, its patterns unraveling. Sierra's voice cut through the chaos of command. Press forward, hold the rhythm, do not let them silence us. And for the first time, Earth sang back against the storm. Elias moved between command stations, his mind burning with exhaustion. Every screen showed devastation, cities crumbling, skies splitting, oceans surging, but also resistance. Soldiers refused to yield. Civilians carried supplies into the fire. Engineers jury-rigged weapons from shattered debris. Humanity did not wait for salvation. Humanity became its own salvation. The remnants fought alongside them, their alien frames trembling under the weight of their own memories. They had watched countless realms erased, but now here they saw a species that did not break, that bent but did not shatter. Their emissary spoke to Elias during a brief lull, its mandibles quivering. "You are madness," it rasped. "You are reckless. You burn even as the storm devours. And yet you endure. Elias stared at the sky, where light clashed against sound. That is what it means to be human. But victory on Earth was only survival. The storm pulsed, growing larger, its form fractaling outward until it threatened to engulf the entire world. Humanity could not simply defend, they had to strike. The plan was born in whispers, then shouted in councils, then forged into command, to take the fight into the breach itself. To follow the storm into the impossible spaces it called home. It was madness, it was suicide, and it was the only chance. The fleet that departed Earth was unlike anything the species had ever built. Warships bristled with resonance cannons. Carriers housed drones whose wings shimmered with crystalline shards. Alien vessels joined them, grotesque in design but powerful in their harmonics. At the fleet's heart was the spearhead, the Nexus Harrow, a ship built around the stabilized core of a portal. It would pierce the breach and anchor humanity's presence within the storm's domain. Elias stood aboard the Harrow's bridge, Sierra at his side, remnants scattered among the crew. Outside the viewport, the sky above the Pacific tore open, light cascading down in endless curtains. "Engage the breach," Sierra commanded. The Harrow surged forward, its engines screaming as the portal widened. Light swallowed them whole. The other side defied language. The fleet emerged into a place without horizon, without sky, without ground. Fragments of worlds drifted like shattered glass, each fragment holding pieces of reality. A forest frozen in silence, a city turned upside down, a sea flowing upward into nothing. And through it all pulsed the storm. Vast shapes moved across the void, fractal bodies shimmering with hunger. They turned as one toward the intruders. The battle began, the void filled with fury. Warships unleashed resonance cannons, their beams shattering fractal limbs. Drones darted between impossible geometries, detonating crystalline cores against radiant forms. Alien vessels sang in unison, their chants vibrating through the void, tearing rifts in the storm's flesh. But the storm was endless. Every limb cut away spawned two more, every form shattered reassembled from fragments. It was not an enemy that could be defeated by attrition. Elias knew this, and yet he fought. "Focus fire on the Nexus nodes," he shouted, pointing to glowing cores within the storm's body. "Disrupt its coherence." The fleet adjusted, cannons shifted, chants realigned. The void shook as the first node shattered, light bleeding away into nothingness. The storm recoiled. For the first time, it faltered, but the victory came at a price. Ships burned in radiant fire. Drones were torn apart by limbs vast as mountains. Alien chants broke into screams as vessels collapsed under the weight of impossible geometries. The Harrow pressed forward, its shields flickering, its core trembling under strain. Sierra stood at the helm, her eyes burning with fury. "We cannot hold this line," a captain shouted over comms. "We are not here to hold," Sierra replied. "We are here to pierce." The Harrow drove straight into the storm's heart. The closer they came, the more the void bent, shapes twisted, time fractured. Elias felt memories slipping away, his name, his face, the sound of his mother's voice. He clutched the console, forcing himself to remember. He was Elias, he was human, he would not yield. At the storm's heart pulsed a core larger than mountains, a singularity of light and hunger. It was the source, the will, the endless want. The Harrow's engines roared as they locked onto it. "Fire the anchor," Sierra commanded. The portal core at the ship's center unleashed its power, stabilizing a rift directly inside the storm's essence. The void screamed as reality itself was forced into the impossible. The storm convulsed, limbs thrashing, forms shattering, but it was not destroyed. Not yet. The fleet poured everything into the breach. Resonance cannons, crystalline detonations. Alien chants, human defiance. The storm screamed louder, its voice echoing across every mind, trying to drown them in despair. Elias staggered under the weight of it, his skull burning. He saw visions of erased realms, of civilizations reduced to silence, of infinity bending toward oblivion. But then he heard another sound, not the storm, voices, human voices, soldiers singing in defiance. Engineers shouting over sparks, Civilians chanting from shelters back on Earth, their cries carried through comms. The storm was vast, but humanity was loud, and humanity would not be silenced. The harrow pressed deeper, its hull fracturing, alarms screaming. Sierra gripped the helm with bloodied hands, refusing to let go. "Elias," she shouted over the chaos, "this is it. We must strike now." Elias looked at the core, pulsing with impossible hunger. He knew no weapon could destroy it outright, but perhaps it did not need to. Perhaps it only needed to be shown something it had never known. Defiance without end. "Channel everything," Elias commanded. "Every song, every weapon, every voice. Pour it all into the breach." The fleet obeyed. Humans and remnants alike gave everything. The void lit with fire, sound, and will. The storm screamed not in hunger but in pain. As the core trembled, Elias felt its mind brush against his own. Vast, endless, consuming, it promised him silence. It promised him erasure. He answered with a single thought: "We are human, we do not bow." And with that, the storm shattered. Fragments of light cascaded outward, dissolving into nothing. The void rippled, then stilled. The impossible geometries fell silent. For the first time since the portals opened, the hunger was gone. The harrow drifted, broken but alive. The fleet floated in silence, battered but unyielding. Elias collapsed to his knees, tears burning his eyes. Sierra stood beside him, her body trembling, her face fierce. "We did it," she whispered. "No," Elias said, his voice raw. "Humanity did it." And in the silence of the void, he felt something stir, not hunger, not despair, but awe. Back on Earth, when the fleet returned, the world erupted in celebration. Cities that had burned rebuilt. Oceans that had boiled calmed. Skies once split with light now stretched clear and whole. The remnants, what few survived, bowed their heads before humanity. "You have done what we could not," their emissary said. "You have wounded hunger, you have silenced silence. Perhaps you are not corruption after all. Perhaps you are the flame we never were." Elias looked upon the horizon of a healed world, his heart heavy with scars but alive with hope. The storm had fallen, and humanity still stood. The storm had fallen. The void that once pulsed with hunger lay silent, its shattered fragments dissolving into nothingness. The fleet drifted amid the aftermath, battered and broken, yet unyielding. Elias stood on the fractured bridge of the harrow, breathing air heavy with smoke and the scent of burnt metal. Around him, the crew moved like ghosts, exhausted but alive. Some wept openly, unable to contain the release of tension. Others sat in silence, staring at the still void as if waiting for the storm to reassemble. But it did not. The impossible geometries no longer twisted. The shards of frozen forests and inverted seas dissolved into motes of fading light. The silence was not the silence of hunger, but the silence of an enemy vanquished. For the first time since humanity had opened the first portal, the void was still. The fleet limped back through the breach, returning to the skies above Earth. The portal closed behind them with a finality that shook every heart aboard. When they broke through the clouds and saw the world below scarred but whole, wounded but alive, cheers erupted across comms. Cities that had burned now flickered with lights. Oceans that had boiled now stretched calm and endless. Skies once torn open by radiant fissures were clear, blue, familiar. Humanity had not been erased. Humanity had endured. And humanity had won. Celebrations swept across the planet in the days that followed. Streets filled with people singing and dancing, their voices carrying into the night. Soldiers returned home to parades. Engineers were lifted upon shoulders. Families reunited with tears and laughter. For a brief time, Earth felt united in a way it had never known. Nations that once glared across borders embraced. Rivalries that once burned were forgotten. Humanity had faced something greater than all divisions combined, and humanity had triumphed together. Elias walked those streets, seeing the faces of those who had nearly been erased. He felt their joy, their gratitude, their awe, yet inside he carried something heavier, for he had seen the storm more closely than any of them. He had felt its hunger press against his mind, its promise of silence, and he knew victory did not mean safety, it meant responsibility. The remnants who survived gathered in solemn quiet. Once proud and defiant, they now walked with reverence in the presence of humanity. Their emissary came before the human council, its scarred form trembling as it bowed low. "We fought for ages uncounted," it rasped. "We erased countless realms, desperate to blind the hunger. We failed. But you faced it not with erasure, not with silence, but with defiance. You did what we never could." Sira, standing beside Elias, studied the alien with cool eyes. "Then you see now what humanity is." The emissary's mandibles clattered. "We see you are flame, you are madness, you are the impossible weapon. Perhaps creation itself shaped you for this moment." Elias spoke, his voice firm. "Not for this moment, for all moments. If hunger rises again, we will meet it. If silence returns, we will answer with sound." The chamber was silent. Then the emissary bowed again, deeper than before. "Then you are no longer alone in this fight. We will follow you, not as rulers, not as masters, but as fire follows wind, spreading into darkness." Weeks passed. Humanity rebuilt with fervor, drawing strength from its scars. Cities rose from rubble stronger than before. Oceans cleansed themselves with human ingenuity. Forests were replanted, nurtured with care. But beyond rebuilding, humanity expanded. The portals remained, though carefully guarded now. Fleets stood watch over them, their hulls bristling with weapons of resonance and shard. Colonies formed not only upon the alien dimension, but upon other fragments discovered beyond. Humanity did not fear expansion, for fear had been burned away in the storm. Where the remnants had hesitated, humanity surged. Not blindly, not recklessly, but with clear-eyed determination. For now, they knew what lay beyond creation's edge, and they refused to leave the fight unfinished. Yet even as humanity grew, shadows lingered. Elias felt them in his dreams, echoes of the storm, faint whispers of silence that brushed his mind. He woke in the night, gasping, his chest heavy. He wondered if the hunger was truly gone, or if fragments yet lingered in places unseen. He spoke of this to Sira one night, as they stood upon the balcony of the rebuilt Nexus Citadel, the stars stretching wide above them. "Do you feel it?" he asked quietly. "The storm may be broken, but pieces remain. They wait, they watch." Sira's gaze was steady. "Perhaps, but fragments are not the whole. We showed that even hunger can bleed, and if it bleeds, it can die." Elias looked at her, at the fire in her eyes, and found his fear tempered. "You believe it is over?" "No," she said simply. "I believe it has only begun. Humanity has stepped onto a path none have walked before. We carry the flame now, and we will burn bright enough to keep the dark at bay." Elias nodded, the weight in his chest lifting slightly. For though the storm whispered still, humanity's fire roared louder. The remnants shared their archives at last. Hidden chambers, sealed for eons, were opened. Scrolls etched in crystal, songs carved into stone, visions captured in living memory. Humanity devoured them, not with reverence but with hunger for understanding. And in those records, truths emerged. The storm was not the first. Others had risen before, hungers of different forms, silences of different shapes. Each had been born from the same source, the shadow cast by creation itself. Every act of birth carried within it the seed of its opposite. Worlds had risen, fought, fallen, erased. Until now, humanity was the first to turn the shadow upon itself, the first to answer silence with sound, the first to win. Years passed. Humanity spread across dimensions like wildfire, not with conquest, but with guardianship. Portals became bridges, not only between worlds, but between species. Where once humanity stood alone, now others joined, remnants, survivors of lesser realms, even creatures that had once fled in terror. Together they formed not an empire, not a dominion, but something greater, a covenant of the defiant. A promise that no storm would ever consume them again. Elias grew older, his hair streaked with silver, his body scarred from battles long past, yet he walked among the new worlds with unbroken stride. Children followed him, wide-eyed, listening to stories of the storm. Soldiers saluted him with reverence, their voices steady with pride. He did not seek titles, but they gave him one all the same, the witness, the man who had seen hunger and refused to bow. Sira became the flame that led humanity's fleets. Her name carried weight across worlds, her voice a rallying cry that could steady even the most terrified. Where she walked, armies followed. Where she commanded, victories bloomed. Together she and Elias carried the legacy of that first impossible triumph, not as rulers, not as saviors, but as symbols of what humanity had become, not corruption, not anomaly, but defiance itself. On the 20th year after the storm's fall, a new breach opened. Scouts reported shapes emerging, not radiant hunger, not fractal silence, but something else. Another shadow born from creation's edge, vast and alien. The council trembled, fear rising once again. Some whispered that humanity's fire had only provoked greater darkness. Others whispered that this was the end, that no victory could be repeated. Elias stood before them, his voice steady though his heart was heavy. Do you not see? This is not curse. This is not punishment. This is proof. Proof that creation will always cast shadows. Proof that silence will always follow sound. But we are not silence. We are not shadow. We are the flame that answers both. He looked into every face, human and alien alike, and saw fear bending into resolve. Let them come, Elias said. Let every shadow rise. We will not bow. We will not break. We are human. And we will fight until the dark itself remembers our defiance. And so they did. Battle followed battle. Realm followed realm. Shadows rose and shadows fell. And each time humanity stood at the center, carrying fire into silence, carving sound into void, not always victorious, not always without loss, but always unbroken, always human. Elias lived long enough to see generations rise who had never known the first storm. Children who grew beneath skies unscarred, who traveled portals as casually as roads, who spoke not of fear but of promise. On his final day, he walked to the edge of the Nexus Citadel, where the first portal had opened so many years ago. The air shimmered with light, but no longer with dread. Instead, it hummed with power, with possibility. Sira stood beside him, older now, her face lined with years, but her eyes still burning. Do you regret it? She asked softly. Elias shook his head. Never. The storm taught us who we are. It thought we were prey. It thought we were silence, but we are neither. He turned his gaze to the horizon, where new worlds beckoned. We are the unbroken. We are the defiant. We are human. And with that he smiled, knowing the flame would never die. Humanity endured. Humanity expanded. Humanity became more than survivor, more than warrior, more than flame. Humanity became the answer to silence, and the cosmos would never forget it. Years passed like rivers through the cosmos, endless and relentless. The storm was gone, yet its shadow lingered in memory, in scarred worlds, in the tremors of minds who had stared into impossible hunger and returned alive. Humanity did not forget. They could not. The echoes of the storm were embedded in every heartbeat, every building, every portal that shimmered across the skies. Elias walked among those echoes in his final years. The scars of the battles, burned flesh, broken bone, fractured memory, had left marks that no passing of time could erase. His hair was silvered now, eyes rimmed with lines of sleepless nights, yet his gaze remained fierce. Wherever he went, people turned to watch, as if the man who had stared into nothing and refused to bow were a beacon, a living testament that defiance could endure even against the impossible. Sira remained by his side, the flame that had led humanity's fleets across the void, now tempered by years of triumph and loss. Her armor had long since been retired, replaced with ceremonial robes that shimmered with light not for battle but for honor. Yet her eyes, like Elias, still burned with the memory of those first breaches, the first radiant shapes that had pressed against their minds, the first moments when death seemed inevitable and yet could not claim them. Together they walked through the Nexus Citadel, now rebuilt and expanded, a sprawling city of crystal and steel that pulsed with energy drawn from stabilized portals. The Citadel was both a monument and a machine, a city alive in service of its people, its guardians, its explorers. Children ran along the corridors, laughter echoing through halls that had once known nothing but alarms and fear. Engineers moved through open labs, still experimenting, still pushing the boundaries of knowledge and resilience. Elias paused at a balcony overlooking the central plaza. Below, thousands had gathered, not for war, not for ceremony, but to remember. A festival of remembrance and triumph, a celebration of survival against the impossible. A choir of voices rose from the square, human and alien alike, singing songs woven with harmonics learned from the remnants, melodies that vibrated through the air and even into the stones themselves. The emissaries of other worlds were present, their forms diverse and strange, yet united in recognition of what humanity had achieved. The remnants, survivors of a fallen empire that had once sought to erase them, now walked openly among the crowd. Their eyes, once filled with suspicion and fear, now shone with a grudging awe. Humanity had proven itself beyond measure, and even they, ancient and battle-hardened, could not deny it. Elias watched in silence, the weight of years pressing on his shoulders. Victory had been hard-won. The storm had tested them in ways that defied comprehension, and the cost had been steep. Friends, soldiers, civilians, even alien allies, so many had fallen. But those who remained had carried the torch forward, and the world now thrummed with life, with possibility, with fire. Sira joined him, her presence calm but unyielding. "You think too much," she said, a wry smile touching her lips. "You cannot measure the weight of victory by the scars alone. Look at them, look at what remains." Elias nodded slowly. "I see, and yet I feel them too, those we lost, those we could not save. Even now I feel the storm's echo." She placed a hand on his arm. "Then let them feel it too, let them carry it forward. That is the purpose of memory, that is the purpose of fire." In the weeks that followed, humanity continued to expand across the portals. Colonies flourished not only on the alien world that had once been a battlefield, but on other fragments discovered beyond, worlds whose landscapes defied logic, yet offered resources and life. Cities rose in impossible geometries, blending alien architecture with human ingenuity. Energy drawn from crystalline shards, resonance harmonics, and the very fabric of the portals themselves powered entire civilizations. Where once humanity had feared the unknown, it now embraced it. Explorers moved boldly into realms that had terrified even the remnants, bringing back knowledge, resources, and sometimes entire species that had survived in secret. Humanity did not conquer in the old sense. They protected, they stabilized, they nurtured, and in doing so, they expanded the circle of life across dimensions. The portals became arteries of connection, not just pathways for soldiers or explorers, but bridges between species, between cultures, between worlds. Trade, diplomacy, and knowledge flowed freely. Ships traveled from one fragment to another, carrying humans and allies alike. And in every corner of the expanding frontier, the memory of the storm remained, a reminder that defiance was the true currency of survival. Elias spent much of this time walking among these new worlds, observing, advising, teaching. He spoke to children of distant colonies, recounting the first breaches and the battles that had followed. He did not embellish, nor did he spare them the truth of loss, but he also spoke of courage, of ingenuity, of the unbreakable spirit that had carried humanity through every trial. He met survivors of battles long past, soldiers who had faced the storm directly, engineers who had built the weapons that tore its limbs apart, and civilians who had fled across dimensions to safety. He listened to their stories, their grief, their triumphs, and he recorded them. Every name, every act of bravery, every small defiance against annihilation was etched into memory, into the archives of humanity and the remnants alike. And in every story, he saw a single thread, the unyielding nature of the human spirit. No matter how vast the enemy, no matter how impossible the odds, humans endured, humans adapted, humans triumphed. Time passed, and Elias' body grew frail. Scars that had once marked his victories became aches that reminded him of age. Yet his mind remained sharp, his spirit undimmed. He often visited the edge of the Nexus Citadel, gazing through stabilized portals into the other realms, watching fleets move, seeing colonies thrive. One day, as he stood there, a young cadet approached him, eyes wide with curiosity. "Sir," the cadet asked, "will the storm ever return?" Elias smiled faintly. "Perhaps. Hunger never sleeps and silence always waits. But remember this, we are fire, we are defiance, we are human, and fire never bows to silence." The cadet nodded solemnly, understanding more in that moment than words could convey. Eventually, the day came when Elias did not rise from his chamber. His passing was quiet, unmarked by ceremony, yet the world felt the tremor of loss. Across Earth and the colonies, people paused. Ships that were mid-voyage halted for moments. Portals shimmered in stillness. And everywhere, a single thought passed among those who knew him. The witness had completed his journey. Sierra stood over his resting place, a monument of crystal rising from the Citadel Plaza. She spoke aloud, her voice carrying across the wind and into the hearts of all who listened. "He saw the storm and refused to bow. He taught us to fight when all seemed lost. He reminded us what it means to be human. He is gone, but his flame endures." And indeed it did. Across worlds, across generations, the teachings of Elias and Sierra endured. Children learned of the storm, but they learned also of the courage, of the ingenuity, of the spirit that refused to be silenced. Humanity spread further, not as conquerors, but as guardians, shaping alliances, protecting realms, and ensuring that no shadow could rise unchallenged. Centuries passed. Humanity flourished beyond measure. The remnants, once fractured and fearful, integrated fully into the galactic civilization humanity had nurtured. They built schools of thought, libraries of harmonics, and fleets of exploration alongside humans. Where once the cosmos had threatened erasure, now it witnessed a force of stability and innovation. New threats arose, as they always would, for the universe is never still. But each time humanity answered, not with fear, not with submission, but with sound, with fire, with ingenuity, with courage. The lessons of the storm were never forgotten. The universe might test them endlessly, but humanity would never break. Sierra, too, eventually passed, leaving behind a legacy entwined with Elias. Together, their names became legend, not worshipped, not idolized, but remembered as guides who had led humanity through the darkness and into the light of its own defiance. On the 1000th anniversary of the first breach, humanity held a ceremony across every colony, every portal, every allied world. Ships of crystal and steel, stars shining through resonance fields, formed a chain of light across dimensions. Choirs sang songs that carried across worlds, weaving harmonics that resonated with the fabric of reality itself. And in that moment, the story of Elias and Sierra, of the storm and the victories that followed, became mythic. Not a story of fear, but of endurance. Not a tale of shadows, but of fire. The universe, vast and unknowable, continued on. Stars were born, worlds turned, life found a way again and again. But humanity, unbroken, defiant, unstoppable, stood as a single truth, that even in the face of impossible hunger, in the presence of silence that could erase worlds, fire could endure, and fire did endure. Elias' voice echoed through memory, through story, through the hearts of all who carried the flame. "We are human, we do not bow, we do not break, and we will never be silenced." And across the cosmos, humanity answered. The flame of defiance, first lit in the halls of the Black Citadel and carried through every battle, every portal, every impossible moment, burned eternal. And so it will always burn.